Welcome back, everyone. Ready to dive into something really fascinating.
I am. Always up for exploring new survival wisdom.
Well, today we're going deep into the heart of Apache shelter building. Like, not just basic stuff.
Yeah.
These are techniques passed down for generations, people really connected to their land.
Yeah, I find that blend of practicality and like almost a philosophy so intriguing. We'll be looking at how these shelters protect you, but also how they create a sense of safety, even a spiritual connection, some say.
Whoa, yeah, that's a whole other level of survival thinking, right? And
Right.
the sources we have are incredible. There's this ebook, Apache Survival and Preparedness, that gets super detailed.
I'm just reading that one. Very cool.
Right. Plus, we've got some firsthand accounts from people trained in these traditions, which I always find, I don't know, just make it more real.
Oh, absolutely. Hearing those personal stories, you really see how these techniques work in practice.
And get this, we're not just talking like tying a tarp between trees. We're diving into lean-tos, debris huts.
And the wiki up.
Yes, the wiki-up, that iconic dome shape. I have so many questions about that one.
Well, buckle up because it's got a fascinating history and cultural significance within the Apache community. More than just shelter, it's a symbol, really. But maybe before we jump ahead.
Good point. Gotta start with the basics.
Right. Why is shelter so crucial in the first place?
I mean, my mind goes straight to rain, wind, protection from the elements.
Of course, yeah. But there's a deeper layer, too. Like, picture yourself in a real survival situation. You need to think clearly, just as much as stay physically safe.
That's true.
So if you've got a secure shelter, that stress melts away and your mind can focus on other tasks.
Yeah, I get that. It's like when I finally find a quiet spot to work, and boom, suddenly the ideas flow.
Perfect analogy. And in survival training, they emphasize shelter early on for that reason.
Really?
Yeah, it sets you up for success. Shelter helps you save energy, stay hydrated, keep a positive outlook.
So it's like the shelter creates this foundation of resilience mentally.
Exactly. A psychological safety net so you can handle the challenges that come your way.
Okay, I'm hooked. Now, the Apache shelters themselves, my knowledge is a bit basic. Lean-to, I kind of get.
Yeah.
The debris hut, wookie-up. What makes those unique?
Each one's adapted for different needs, different environments. Lean-to, it's your classic quick setup, basic protection. But the debris hut, that one goes heavy on camouflage, and insulation almost disappears.
Hey, camouflage, now that's cool. Tell me more about that.
And then there's the wiki-up. That dome isn't just for looks. It's incredibly strong, wind-resistant, and roomy inside. You'd be surprised.
All right, I can already tell. Apache building, it's not just practical, it's like artistic almost, or working with nature.
Exactly. Respect for the environment, deep understanding of what they're using. There's this great story in one source about this lost hiker, Jake.
I think I read that one.
He runs into an Apache elder in these whispering pines, and the elder, he gives him a crash course on shelter location. Not all spots are equal.
Very true. You can have a great design, but if it's in the wrong spot.
Yeah. Waste of effort. This elder teaches him these timeless principles, things we can use too. Sturdy tree for support, not too close to water that might rise, and the shelter entrance, facing away from the wind.
So you're observing everything, not just throwing up a structure anywhere.
Right. You got to read the landscape, those natural forces, even subtle clues, like which plants are thriving there.
Wow, that's detailed. Is there anything else for finding that ideal spot? Stuff that's, I don't know, not as obvious.
Good question. The sources warn about little things that make a big difference. Don't camp under dead trees, obviously. Steer clear of animal trails. You don't want those visitors. And be mindful of being too visible if there are threats around.
Like a mental checklist, running through all the good and the bad.
Exactly. And from there, well, that leads us to what you're actually building with. The Apache, they rely heavily on what nature provides. Really resourceful.
Yeah, the sources mention wood, leaves, grass, mud, even stone. And techniques like satching and adobe, that's old school stuff, right? Like almost art forms.
Definitely an art to it. Thatching, that's weaving together dried grasses, reeds, branches to make a watertight roof. And adobe, it's mud brick basically. Earth, water, sometimes straw. Makes sturdy walls, good insulation too.
Wow, they're really using what's available. There's a sustainability angle there.
Big time. Take only what you need, non-invasive harvesting, and a lot of sources talk about connecting with local communities.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, learn from folks who truly know the land, passing down that wisdom. Beautiful stuff.
So it's building relationships too, not just shelters.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got location, materials. Now the fun part, building. What tools are we talking?
Depends on how fancy you're getting and what environment you're in. Could be simple hand tools.
Yeah.
Your
Yeah.
saw, axe, hammer, screwdriver.
And measuring tools too, right? I'm picturing, like, for a wiki up especially, you need accuracy.
For sure. Precision matters. And then you
Yeah.
get into power tools, your drill, circular saw, jigsaw if you need those curves.
Okay, power tools definitely speed things up. But before we get too excited about building, gotta talk safety. You're the expert here. Lay it on us.
Absolutely. Cannot overstate this. Doesn't matter how basic the task. Gotta protect yourself. Goggles, gloves, hard hat,
Right, right.
and ear protection, especially with power tools. Minimizing risk is key.
100% agree. The sources also mention, like, specialized tools for specific jobs, leveling tools for bigger builds, trowels if you're doing that Adobe work.
Oh, and the pry bar. That thing's a lifesaver. So versatile.
Pry bar always comes in handy. But, there's another side to this, beyond just the physical tools.
Oh, yeah, there's a deeper aspect to it.
In the sources, there's this story about Maria, an Apache craftswoman.
Maria, yeah, her perspective was really powerful.
It's like building with respect, not just hammering stuff together. She talks about each layer of the shelter being a promise. What did she mean by that?
Well, for her, each step's a commitment to whoever's going to use that shelter. Protection, warmth, connection to the ancestors who taught this stuff.
Wow, it's almost spiritual then, woven into the building itself.
Exactly. And that respect goes for the materials, too. Knowing which plants are safe, which are harmful. There's a whole section in one source on poisonous plants to avoid.
Makes sense. Respect also means knowing the dangers.
Right. You're using nature, but you're also being cautious. And that awareness, that leads us into actually building these different shelter types. Let's start simple. The lean-to.
Okay, I'm visualizing slanted roof, leaning against a support wall, right? What materials are we usually talking about?
Basic, efficient. The wall could be a big rock, fallen tree trunk, even branches anchored well. Roof, you can use branches, poles, metal sheeting if you've got it. Even a tarp works great. Just needs to shed that rain, block some wind.
Yeah, very adaptable. Like a survival shelter for minimalists, whatever's around. I know the source gives step-by-step for lean-tos. Anything key to remember?
Well, as we've said, location is number one. Your terrain, wind, where the resources are, those hazards.
Finding that sweet spot, safe and supportive.
Exactly. Then you build the frame, usually sturdy branches, got to anchor them well. Roof needs that slant to shed rain. And finally, you cover it with whatever you've got. Leaves, bark, or that tarp if you brought one.
Seems pretty straightforward, especially if you're going the natural route. The source mentions insulation as optional. Is that more for cold weather?
For sure, makes a huge difference in keeping warm if it's chilly. Leaves, pine needles, moss. You can even use modern stuff like foam panels if you have them.
I like it. A cozy nest of leaves sounds comfy, actually.
It can be. And what's great about the lean-to is you can start basic, then upgrade over time, add walls, a better roof, even raise it off the ground.
Evolves along with your skills. I like that.
Okay,
Oh, on to something more complex. Debris hut. This one's all about blending in, right?
you got it. Camouflage and insulation are key here. It takes more effort, but you're really protected from the elements.
Okay, break down this camouflage thing for me. How do you even start a debris hut? Just like piling stuff up.
You start with a framework, like the lean-to, sturdy branches, but then you layer on debris. Leaves, pine needles, grass, moss, anything, making a thick layer.
Like building a blanket out of nature.
Huh.
I get the insulation part, but you must need a lot of debris.
You do. And it's not just piling, gotta choose the right stuff. The source says know your environment, use what's naturally abundant there, what works in that climate.
So pine needles in a pine forest, leaves where there's lots of leaves.
Exactly. And a well-built debris hut, it can get surprisingly cozy, especially if you get that insulation thick. There's this story about this girl, Sarah. She used her grandma's teachings to build one during a storm.
Oh, I think I remember Sarah.
She stayed safe and warm all night. Proves these techniques are just as useful now as they were back then.
Okay, I'm ready for the main event, the wiki up. That dome shape, I just imagine it's both practical and beautiful.
It's something special, for sure. Shows the ingenuity of the Apache people.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's not just about function. There's culture woven into it, too.
The culture part, that's what I'm really curious about. What does the wiki up represent to them?
It's more than a shelter. It's a symbol of their whole way of life. That dome shape, it shows balance, harmony with nature, represents cycles, interconnectedness, the importance of community.
Beautiful. Like the values are built into the structure itself, but I bet the shape has a practical purpose too.
Oh, for sure. Super wind resistant, which is important in the places they lived. Distributes weight well, makes it strong. But to build it, you got to start with the right spot, level ground, some wind protection.
Location, location, location.
Yep. solid foundation. Then you gather saplings, long, flexible branches, 8 to 10 feet long, lots of them to make that circular frame.
Ah, so the saplings create the dome shape, all bent and woven together?
Right? You bend them, secure them at the top, strong 80 flexible, and then, like the debris hut, you add layers of thatching material, grass, reeds, bark, whatever's local and good for waterproofing.
So they both use layering, but the framework is totally different. One's rigid, one's all flexible and woven. Really shows how they adapt to different materials.
You got it. And that dome, not only strong against wind, it makes a surprisingly big space inside. Room for a fire in the center, for warmth and cooking, even space for folks to gather comfortably.
I'm picturing it now like less temporary shelter, more like a home, almost.
It does blur the lines, doesn't it? And there's this story in one source about this guy, David. He learns to build one, but also learns about the cultural meaning.
The stories are the best part. David's experience, I want to hear about that.
He learns that it's not just about survival skills, it's about connecting with the land, history, the sense of community that goes way back.
You're building a bridge to the past, not just a shelter. But, while those traditional methods are amazing, there's also room for modern stuff, right?
Oh, absolutely. The sources talk about using modern materials to make things even stronger, more comfortable.
Yeah, we have so many options now. How do you blend those effectively?
Like, you could use PVC pipe instead of wood poles for the wiki-up frame. Super light, strong, easy to find. Tarps are great for weatherproofing, extra layer of protection, and insulation, like foam panels that can make any shelter way warmer.
Best of both worlds. I can even see like a modern wiki-up being a sustainable living space or a retreat center.
The potential is huge. And that adaptability, that's what's important. We've got these 3 great types: lean-to, debris hut, wiki-up. But what about adapting them to different environments? Forests, mountains, deserts, wetlands. Each one's got unique challenges, right?
Make total sense. A forest shelter would be totally different from a desert one. What do you have to consider when adapting designs like that?
Always got to think about the terrain, the climate, what resources are available, and any specific dangers. In a forest, you might use the trees for cover or build a platform to get off that damp ground.
And mountains. You'd need to think about snow, strong winds.
Oh, yeah. Got to have a steep roof to shed snow. Maybe a more aerodynamic design so the wind doesn't wreck it. And if it's the right conditions, a snow cave can be incredible for insulation.
Snow cave, whoa. That's a whole other skill set right there.
Then you've got deserts, where shade and airflow are everything. You might build partially underground to stay cool during the day. Anything to minimize that sun exposure.
It's amazing how much the shelter changes based on the place.
Yeah.
You're really reading the environment. But as we've said, Apache survival, it goes beyond just shelter.
Totally. It's not one skill, it's this whole toolkit. Navigation, finding water, what food is safe, first aid, signaling for help.
Wow, it's like becoming part of the environment, working with it.
Exactly. And like, take finding water. They talk about dew collection, knowing which plants store water, even reading the land to find underground sources.
That's incredible knowledge. But, knowing and doing are two different things.
You're telling me it's like you can read all the survival books, but...
Got to put it into practice.
Yep. Knowledge without action is useless, they say. So how do we bridge that gap? The sources recommend lots of hands-on stuff, workshops, drills you can do in your yard, even simulating survival scenarios.
Making it instinctual, not just something you read.
Exactly. And they talk about mentorship, which is so important. There's this great story about this elder Hiroshi. He's guiding some young scouts while they learn shelter building.
Mentorship, that's huge. Passing down the skills, A&D, the confidence.
Hiroshi, he doesn't just teach the building, he teaches them respect for the materials, awareness, working as a team.
It's community building too then. And, that brings us to the most powerful part, learning from what actually happens. The sources have all these stories of people who survive crazy situations. What stood out to you?
Definitely the mental toughness. Like, it's not just the physical stuff, it's the willpower to keep going when things get tough.
Yeah, that comes up a lot. Being prepared, working together, making good choices. And resourcefulness, like we talked about. There's that story about Lisa. She uses her Apache knowledge to lead her friends to safety during a storm.
Oh, Lisa, that's a good one.
Shows how you can use these skills in real life, even if it's not the wilderness.
Exactly. Lisa, she didn't freak out. She assessed the situation, used what she knew, took action to keep everyone safe. That calmness, that leadership, that's mental toughness.
Inspiring. Makes me think, these Apache techniques aren't just for out in the wild. They're for surviving anything. being adaptable, resourceful, connected to your surroundings, no matter where you are.
Couldn't agree more. It's like those skills equip you for whatever life throws your way. Natural disaster, a crisis, even just everyday stress, honestly.
It's taking that ancient wisdom and applying it to our lives now.
Exactly. And hey, I think that's a good spot to take a break. We've covered a lot. The basics of shelter building, the specific techniques, materials, adapting to different
We
places.
talked about the culture behind it, that whole philosophy of survival, even how to train and learn from real stories.
Fascinating stuff. Excited to keep exploring in the next part of our dive. So Maria, her approach to all this, it comes from her heritage. She sees it as this back and forth with the land. Take only what you need and give back respect, gratitude.
That's a cool way to look at it.
Mm.
Working with nature, not trying to control it.
Hmm.
I remember she says each layer of the shelter is like a promise. What'd she mean by that?
She sees it as each step you take, it's like promising to care for whoever's going to use that shelter. Each layer, it's protection, warmth, connection to those who came before and taught this stuff.
It's deeper than just building, huh?
For sure. And choosing the right materials, that's part of the respect, too. Knowing your plants, especially the bad ones, like one source had a whole list of poisonous plants, stuff to stay away from.
Yeah, respect means knowing the dangers too.
Right. Use what nature gives, but carefully. And that awareness, it kind of leads us into how to build each type. Should we start with the lean-to? Seems like the simplest one.
Yeah, let's get hands on. So I'm picturing it. Slanted roof, leaning against something solid. What materials are we usually using for this?
It's all about keeping it basic, efficient. That support wall could be a huge rock, a fallen tree, even branches if you anchor them right. The roof itself, branches work, poles, metal sheeting, even a tarp does the trick.
Yeah.
Main thing is, gotta shed rain, block some wind.
Super versatile, like I said, minimalist survival, whatever's around,
Mm.
and the source walks through the steps. Anything we got to keep in mind.
Location, location, location. Can't stress that enough. Think about the ground, the wind, where your resources are, those hazards.
Right. Safe and supportive, that sweet spot.
Yep. Once you got that, build the frame, usually sturdy branches anchored in well. The roof, gonna have that slant for the rain. And lastly, you cover it with whatever you found. Leaves, bark, that tarp if you brought one.
Doesn't sound too hard. Especially with natural stuff. They mention insulation too as an option. That's for colder weather. Yeah.
Definitely makes a difference if it's chilly. Leaves, pine needles, moss. Even the modern stuff, foam panels can help.
It sounds kind of cozy, like a little nest.
It can be. And the cool thing is, you can start simple and improve it over time. Add walls, a more permanent roof, even raise the whole thing off the ground.
Like a shelter that grows with you. I dig that. Okay, on to something more complex.
Yeah.
The debris hut. This one's all about blending in, disappearing.
You got it. Camouflage and insulation, that's the focus here. More effort, but you get serious protection.
Okay, break this camouflage thing down for me. How do you even begin a debris hut? Just a giant pile of leaves.
You start with that framework, like the lean-to, sturdy branches. But then the magic happens. You layer on debris, leaves, pine needles, grass, moss, whatever you can find. Make it THICK.
You're basically making a blanket out of the forest floor. I see the insulation, but man, that's a lot of debris.
It is. And gotta choose the right stuff. Knowing your environment comes in here. The source says, use what's abundant there, what's gonna work in that specific climate.
Makes sense. So pine forests, use pine needles. Lots of leaves, use those.
Exactly. And you'd be surprised how comfy a debris hut can get, especially if you do the insulation right. There's this story, this girl, Sarah, she used her grandma's teachings to build one in a storm.
Sarah. That's a good one. It shows how important those skills can be.
Right. She was warm and safe all night. These techniques, they still work.
All right, I'm ready for the wiki app. That dome shape, I just know it's got to be cool. Practical A&D, beautiful.
It's something else, truly. Apache ingenuity at its finest. And it's not just function, there's a deeper meaning to it.
That's what I want to know about. What's the cultural significance? What does it mean to them?
It's not just shelter, it's like a symbol of their way of life. The dome shape represents balance, being in harmony with nature. The cycles of life, how everything's connected, the importance of community.
Wow, their values are built into the structure. I bet the shape is practical too, though.
Oh, for sure. It's incredibly good against wind, which mattered where they lived. Distributes the weight well, makes it strong. But to build one, gotta start with the right spot. Level ground, some protection from the wind.
Always got to think about location.
First thing. Then you get saplings, those long, bendy branches, 8 to 10 feet long. You need a lot. to make that circular frame.
So those saplings, they become the dome, all bent and woven together.
Yep. You bend them, tie them at the top, strong and flexible. And then, kind of like the debris hut, you add layers of thatching. Grass, reeds, bark, whatever works locally to keep the water out.
So they both use layering, but the support is totally different. One's rigid, one's all flexible. That's awesome adaptation.
Totally. And that dome, it's not just about wind, it actually makes a really spacious inside. You can have a fire in the middle, keep warm, cook. There's room for people to hang out comfortably.
I'm getting it now. It's less like a temporary thing, more like a home.
Right. It's interesting how it blurs that line. And there's this story in one source about a guy, David. He learns to build one, but he learns the meaning behind it too.
I love the stories. Tell me about David.
He realizes it's not just survival, it's connecting with the land, history, this sense of community that goes way back.
It's like you said, a bridge to the past. But, these traditional ways are amazing, but there's room for modern stuff too, right?
Absolutely. The sources talk about using modern materials, make things stronger, more comfy.
Yeah, we have so many options now. How do you combine them well?
Well, like for the wiki-up frame, you could use PVC pipe instead of those wood poles. Lightweight, strong, easy to get. Tarps are amazing for weatherproofing, an extra layer of protection. And insulation, like foam panels, can make a huge difference in warmth.
It's like they're best of both worlds. I
Yeah.
could even see a modern wiki up like as a sustainable house or retreat.
Lots of potential. And that adaptability, that's key. We've got these 3 great types, lean-to, debris hut, wiki-up. But what about adapting those to specific places? Forests, mountains, deserts, wetlands. Each one's different, right?
Totally. You wouldn't build the same thing in a forest as you would in a desert. What are the things you got to think about when adapting like that?
Terrain, always. Climate, of course.
Mhm.
What resources you've got in that spot. And any danger specific to that environment. Like in a forest, you might use the freeze as cover or build a platform to get off that wet ground.
And in the mountains, you got snow, crazy winds.
Yep. You'd need a steep roof to shed the snow, a shape that's aerodynamic so the wind doesn't rip it apart. And if conditions are right, a snow cave can be amazing for insulation.
A snow cave, that's a whole other level.
Then you've got the desert, where shade and airflow are everything. You might even build partly underground to escape that daytime heat. Anything to stay out of the sun.
Wow, it really changes based on the place. You're reading the environment and responding to it.
Mm-hmm.
But as we've said, Apache survival, it's more than building it, right? It's understanding the bigger picture.
You got it. It's not one skill. It's this whole set of skills. Navigation, how to find water, knowing what to eat, first aid, how to signal for help. It's all connected.
Becoming a part of the environment, not just visiting it.
Exactly, like finding water. They talk about collecting dew, knowing which plants store water, even reading the land to find underground springs.
That's amazing. But, reading about this stuff and actually doing it.
2 different things, totally. You can read every survival book, but
Got to get out there.
right. They say knowledge without action, it's useless. So bridging that gap, a lot of the sources say get hands-on experience. Workshops, drills you can do at home, even like mock survival situations.
Making those skills instinct, not just head knowledge.
Exactly. And mentorship, that comes up a lot too. There's this great story, this elder, Hiroshi. He's teaching these young scouts how to build shelters.
Mentorship is huge. Someone to pass down the skills and the belief that you can do it.
And Hiroshi, he doesn't just teach the steps, he teaches respect for what they're using, being aware of what's around them, working as a team.
It's building community, too, like we talked about. And that leads us to what I find the most powerful part. Learning from people who've actually been through it. All those survival stories in the sources, what stuck with you, what really hit me was the mental strength. It's not just knowing the skills, it's the willpower to keep going when it gets rough.
Yeah, mental toughness, for sure. That comes up over and over. And being prepared, teamwork, making smart choices.
Resourcefulness, too, like we've been saying. There's that story about Lisa. She used her Apache knowledge to get her friends to safety during a storm.
Oh yeah, Lisa's story is a good one.
Proves that you can use this stuff in real life, even if it's not out in the wilderness.
Exactly. She didn't panic. She used what she knew, took charge, and got everyone safe. That's what mental strength looks like in a tough situation.
It's inspiring. Makes me realize these Apache ways aren't just about surviving in the woods. They're about surviving anything. Being adaptable, resourceful, connected to your surroundings wherever you are.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Like, those skills prepare you for whatever life throws your way. Natural disaster, some crazy situation, even just the daily grind,
It's ancient wisdom that still works today.
Totally. And I think this is a good spot to pause. We've covered so much. The basics of shelters, the specific ways to build them, materials, how it changes based on the environment.
The culture behind it all, that whole survival philosophy,
Mm,
even how to train and learn from people's experiences.
amazing stuff. Can't wait to continue exploring in the last part of our deep dive. As we've been talking about all these Apache survival techniques, it's really hit me how much they apply to life in general, not just like wilderness stuff.
I know, right? It's like we've been focused on shelters, but really we're uncovering this whole blueprint for resilience, a way of thinking, a way of being that can help you with any kind of challenge.
It's all about that adaptability, being resourceful, connected to what's around you. Those are skills that work everywhere, not just in the woods.
Like that elder told Jake, survival is not just about building a shelter. It is about understanding and respecting the environment you inhabit. And that environment, it could be anything, right? A forest, a city, your workplace.
Exactly. And one thing that keeps popping up in the sources is this idea of community preparedness, like being ready together.
Oh, yeah, I noticed that too. It's rarely a solo thing, surviving. It's about coming together, sharing helping each other out when things get tough.
There's this one story about a group of friends caught in a storm. One of them, Lisa, she uses her knowledge of Apache stuff to get them to safety. But it's not just the skills, it's how she stays calm, keeps everyone's spirits up. They work as a team.
A Lisa story.
Oh,
Yep, it's a good reminder that these skills, they're even more powerful when you use them to help others. It's not just about you making it out, it's about everyone.
right. That's something we can all work on, even if we never face a true wilderness survival thing. A strong community, supporting each other, sharing what we know, that makes everyone more resilient.
We're all in this together, right?
Yeah.
And the more we learn from each other, the better we can handle whatever comes our way.
Well said. Learning about these shelters, it's not justy about surviving in the wild. It's about understanding how connected we are to everything around us, how adaptable we can be in any situation.
That's a really empowering way to think about it. This whole deep dive, it hasn't just been about techniques, it's been about expanding our view of what it means to be resilient, to be resourceful, to be connected.
It's like we got a glimpse into a way of life that values tradition, that respects nature, that puts community first. And those are values we can all take with us wherever we go.
I'm feeling super inspired. I hope our listeners are too. And for anyone who wants to learn more, we've got a bunch of resources in the show notes, books, websites, even some places that offer workshops on this stuff.
Go check it out, do some exploring, try things out, connect with that Apache wisdom. You might surprise yourself with what you learn, not just about survival, but about yourself too.
And remember, survival, it's not just about the end goal, it's about how you get there. It's about learning, adapting, becoming stronger along the way. So until next time, stay curious, stay resilient, and keep exploring.